Mr. Hale, I need you to stay calm. The sharp scent of antiseptic clung to the private hospital room, but nothing could cleanse the weight of the words. William Hale, the billionaire industrialist who built an empire from scratch, sat frozen in his hospital bed, gripping the white sheets. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, terminal, 6 months at most. Dr. Langford's voice was calm, but the words felt like blades. William's jaw clenched. That's impossible. I feel fine. There has to be a mistake. We ran the tests. Twice. I'm sorry. It's best if you start preparing, Dr. Langford replied. William's thoughts spiraled. At 55, he had everything: wealth, control, influence, but no one to carry on his name, no children, no legacy. Everything would fall into the hands of entitled relatives and opportunists. There has to be something you can do, he demanded, something more than just comfort. We can manage your pain, make things easier, but we can't change the diagnosis. William turned away, jaw tight, eyes distant. For the first time in decades, he felt powerless. Back at the estate, Grace Miller wiped her hands on her apron and placed a tray of juice on the dining table. She had worked for William for 8 years and never seen him like this. The commanding presence was gone. He sat slumped in his chair by the window, staring blankly into the garden, fingers tapping the armrest. "Sir, are you all right?" she asked softly. William blinked, slowly looking at her. His skin looked drained, his expression hollow. "Do I look all right, Grace? The doctors just told me I have 6 months to live." Grace gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "That can't be. You're always strong, always in control. Cancer doesn't care how strong I am," he muttered. He rubbed his temples, shoulders hunched under the weight of it all. Grace hesitated, then stepped forward. "I'm so sorry. Is there anything I can do?" William looked up, his eyes steady but heavy. "Yes, there is." She frowned. "Anything. Just tell me. I need an heir, Grace, someone to carry on my name, my legacy." She blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" His voice didn't waver. "I want you to give me that child." Grace froze, her breath caught in her throat. The air in the room felt heavier. "Sir? What did you just say?" she asked, barely audible. William leaned forward, eyes locked on hers. "I need you to have my child. I know it sounds sudden, maybe even insane, but I don't have time to waste. The doctors gave me 6 months. I can't die without an heir." She took a step back, struggling to process what she had heard. "Why me?" "Because I trust you," he said immediately. "You've worked in this house for 8 years. You've never stolen from me, never betrayed my trust, never sold stories to the press. You're kind, honest, and loyal. I need someone like you to be the mother of my child." Grace's voice trembled. "Sir, I'm a virgin." William blinked, visibly surprised. "You are?" She nodded, her hands trembling slightly. "I've never been with anyone. Not like that. And now you're asking me to give myself up for something I never imagined." A flicker of hesitation crossed William's face, but he quickly steadied himself. "Grace, I understand how much I'm asking. I don't expect love. I'm not asking you to feel anything for me. I just want to leave something behind, someone to carry my name. I'll take care of you and the child for the rest of your life. You'll never want for anything." Grace's mind spun. She had grown up in a strict, traditional home where purity was sacred. To offer herself like this went against everything she had been raised to believe. She struggled to speak. I don't know if I can do this." William leaned forward, desperation in his voice. "Please, Grace, I'm begging you." The words struck her. William Hale, the man who ruled boardrooms and intimidated entire industries, was pleading. But how could she give up everything she believed in to fulfill the last wish of a dying man? Days passed and the mansion grew quieter, heavier. William didn't bring it up directly, but she could feel it every time she walked into a room. His eyes always found her. The silence between them said everything. She busied herself with extra chores, scrubbing floors longer than needed, polishing silver she'd already cleaned, trying to escape the weight of the request. But she couldn't run from it forever. One evening, as golden sunlight poured into the grand living room, she found him sitting alone in the dark, head in his hands. His strength had drained from him, leaving only a man facing the end alone. "Sir?" she called softly. He looked up. His face was more tired than she had ever seen. "I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable," he said. I don't know what else to do." Grace's chest ached. She had spent years watching him command respect, make ruthless deals, move through life untouched. Now he was reduced to a plea. She took a deep breath. "If I say yes, what happens next?" William sat up straight. There was a flicker of hope in his expression. "I'll make sure everything is taken care of. I'll have it in writing. You and the child will inherit everything. You'll never be alone." Grace swallowed hard. She had never imagined becoming a mother, especially like this. But William was dying, and despite all his power, he had no one else. Her voice was soft but clear. "Okay, sir, I'll do it." William's eyes widened. "You will?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, I'll have your child." For the first time in weeks, he smiled. But in her heart, Grace wondered if she had just made the greatest mistake of her life. Grace lay awake in her small bedroom, staring at the ceiling. The words she had spoken replayed over and over. "I'll have your child." She had agreed. She had said yes. But now, with the silence of night pressing in, a whirlwind of emotions took hold. Fear, uncertainty, and something else she couldn't yet name. "It's just a medical procedure," she told herself. "Doctors do this all the time. It doesn't have to mean anything." The next morning, she gathered her courage and walked to William's study. Her heart pounded as she knocked. His voice called from within, firm as ever. "Come in." William sat. Behind his mahogany desk, dressed in a crisp white shirt, he looked healthier, almost energized. Grace stepped in, wringing her hands. "I've thought about everything, sir," she began. "Since I agreed, I think we should proceed through artificial insemination. It's safer, less complicated." William leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes unreadable. Then he sighed. "Grace, I need to be honest with you." She tensed. "What do you mean?" His voice softened. "I don't want this to be just a clinical process. I want to feel connected to my child from the very beginning. If we do it the natural way, it would mean everything to me." Her breath caught. "Sir, I told you, I've never been with anyone." He nodded slowly. "I know, and I respect that. But I want this to be more than numbers on a chart. I want to be there in that moment. I want my child to come into this world through something human, something real." Grace stepped back, the walls of her upbringing rising to the surface. This was sacred to her, something she had held on to for so long. I don't take this lightly." William's voice was gentle but weighted. "If you do this, I promise you'll never know pain, hardship, or loneliness. I will protect you and our child with everything I have." Her hands trembled. She looked at him, really looked. Not the billionaire, not the employer, but the man. He was dying. He had no family, and she had the power to give him the one thing he needed most. She turned and left without answering, her thoughts in chaos. That night, Grace sat in her room for hours. She thought of the man who had paid for her mother's surgery without blinking, who had covered her brother's school tuition when no one else would. He had never treated her like a servant. He had treated her like a person, with dignity and kindness. He had never asked for anything. Until now. After dinner, she found him again in his study. He was gazing out the window, lost in thought. When she stepped inside, he turned, his eyes quietly hopeful. She inhaled deeply. "I've made my decision." William straightened, his posture sharp with anticipation. "I'll do it," she said. His face softened with relief, but before he could speak, she continued, "Not because of the inheritance, Not because you promised to take care of me. I'm doing this because you've always been good to me. You've given me and my family more than I could ever repay. This is something I can give back." William blinked. "Grace, I don't even know what to say." She offered a small smile. "Just promise me one thing. Anything. That no matter what happens, you'll be honest with me. This isn't just about an heir. A child needs more than money. They need love, a family, a future." William stepped forward, his expression sincere. "I promise. I'll give this child all the love I have, and I will never let you regret this." Grace nodded. There was no turning back now. Grace stood in front of the mirror in her modest bedroom, her fingers running nervously over the soft fabric of the nightdress William had given her. It was unlike anything she had ever worn. Delicate, expensive, strangely intimate. Her heart pounded. She had agreed to this, but the weight of that choice now settled over her like a storm. She whispered to herself, "How did I get here?" A knock on the door made her jump. William's voice was calm, steady. "Grace, may I come in?" She opened the door, heart hammering. William stood there in a plain white robe, his face softer than she had ever seen it. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, looking into her eyes. "I gave you my word," she said, her voice quiet but steady. He stepped forward gently. "Tonight, I don't want to be Mr. Hale. I don't want this to feel like an obligation. I want you to feel safe, comfortable. I want you to trust me." She nodded, swallowing hard. "I trust you, William." He smiled slightly. "That's the first time you've called me by my name." He reached out, taking her hand, and led her down the hall into his room. She had cleaned this room countless times, but tonight it felt different. The candles cast soft golden light across the walls. The air was warm, quiet, heavy with something unspoken. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands tightly folded in her lap. William sat beside her, watching her with care. "You're nervous," he said gently. I don't know what to do," she admitted. "You don't have to do anything. Just trust me." He lifted her chin, his touch soft. When he leaned in, his kiss was slow, cautious, giving her time to pull away. But she didn't. Something warm spread through her chest, mixing fear with curiosity. As his hands moved gently over her arms and shoulders, she felt herself breathe a little deeper. She had always thought her first time would be terrifying. But with William, there was patience in every touch. He didn't rush. He didn't demand. "Are you okay?" he whispered. She nodded. "I think so." "Then we'll take it slow. No pressure." She closed her eyes as he kissed her forehead, her jawline, her collarbone. She let herself feel each movement, each breath, each brush of his hand. Her body remained tense, but slowly, inch by inch, it began to yield to the unfamiliar tenderness. He took his time, never pushing beyond what she was ready to give. When the moment came, it was careful, quiet, and unlike anything she had ever imagined. She gasped, her fingers clutching his arms. He stopped immediately, resting his forehead against hers. "I'm here. Just breathe." And she did. As the night unfolded, the fear faded. Something new took its place. Something she didn't yet understand, but didn't resist. Later, as they lay in silence, his arms around her and the candles flickering low, Grace stared into the darkness. Her body was exhausted, but her mind was awake. William's voice was soft. "Are you all right?" "I think so." He kissed her gently. "Thank you." She didn't reply, because deep down, she knew this wasn't the end. This was only the beginning. Grace woke to the warmth of sunlight streaming through the curtains and the weight of William's arms gently wrapped around her. The night had been unlike anything she'd ever experienced. She had crossed a line, one she had protected her whole life, and there was no way to go back. She remained still for a moment, unsure of what this all meant now. She had gone through with it, not just for the promise, not just for him, but because something in her heart had allowed it. William stirred beside her, his breath soft against her shoulder. He tightened his hold on her as he whispered, "Good." "Morning, Grace." She swallowed, unsure how to respond. Everything had changed. "Good morning," she finally said. He propped himself up on one elbow and studied her face. His fingers brushed lightly across her cheek. "How do you feel?" She hesitated, her eyes lowering. "Different. A little strange." He smiled. "I expected that." They lay in silence, the kind that was no longer awkward, but full of unspoken thoughts. Grace pulled the blanket a little higher. "William, what happens now?" He reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers. "Now, we wait. We see if what happened brings the child I've hoped for. But no matter what, you're not alone in this. You never will be." His words were sincere, but the weight in her chest didn't ease. She had given something no one else ever had: her innocence, her trust. She had stepped into a world she didn't recognize. And though William seemed peaceful, she wasn't sure if her heart had caught up with her actions. 4 weeks passed. Grace stood in the bathroom, hands trembling, her eyes locked on the small white test stick on the sink. 2 bold pink lines stared back at her. She was pregnant. She gripped the edge of the sink for support, emotions crashing through her: fear, disbelief, awe, and beneath it all, sadness. Sadness for William, who might never live to see the child he had longed for. She whispered his name like a prayer. "William." Meanwhile, in his study, William stared at the calendar. Red marks crossed through each passing day. Every box reminded him that time was slipping through his fingers. What had once been 6 months was now 5. He whispered under his breath, "Just let me live long enough to hold my child. Let me see their face. Let me hear their first cry." A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he said. Grace stepped into the room, her fingers tightly clasped in front of her. He sat up straighter the moment he saw her. "Grace, are you all right? You look pale." She walked closer, her breath unsteady. "I have something to tell you." His heart pounded. He already knew. He could see it in her eyes, the way she carried herself, the quiet trembling beneath her voice. He stood slowly, as if the truth would meet him halfway. "Grace, is it?" She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm pregnant." His breath left him in a rush. He reached out and cradled her face in both hands, his eyes bright with disbelief. "You're carrying my child." She nodded again, smiling through her tears. "We're going to have a baby." He let out a choked laugh, overwhelmed. His forehead pressed against hers, tears slipping down his cheeks. "Thank you, Grace." "Thank you." As they held each other, his body trembled. His heart was full, but so was his fear. Would he live to see his child's first smile, his first steps? He pulled back and looked into her eyes. "No matter what happens, I will take care of you and this baby. I promise you that." But deep inside, he repeated the same prayer over and over. "Just let me hold my child before I go." 5 months had passed. Grace sat beside William on the living room couch, her hand gently resting on her growing belly. The warmth of his hand covered hers, his fingers tracing soft circles across the fabric of her dress. The twins inside her were strong and active, and while life grew within her, William's strength faded each day. He had lost weight. His face was thinner, his steps slower, and his breath shorter. But he never complained. He smiled through the pain, found peace in every moment he could spend beside her, and hope in every kick he felt from her belly. Grace had watched him transform. The fierce businessman who once terrified competitors was now a father-to-be who spoke to his unborn children each morning. He would kneel beside her bed, press his lips to her stomach, and whisper dreams into their future, dreams he wasn't sure he would live to see. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the room, William shifted his weight and leaned gently against her shoulder. "Are you comfortable?" he asked. She smiled and ran her fingers through his thinning hair. "I should be asking you that." He chuckled, the sound quieter now. I'm fine, just tired. He rested his hand on her belly again, feeling the movement inside. His eyes softened and his voice grew quieter. I still can't believe we're only a few months away from meeting them. Grace swallowed the lump in her throat. You'll be there, William. You'll hold them. You have to. He didn't answer right away. He looked up at her with tired but determined eyes. I'm fighting every single day. You give me the reason to keep going. Her heart twisted. She had never imagined loving someone like this. She had never imagined her life entwining so completely with another's. But somewhere between the quiet mornings and the whispered conversations, between the tenderness and the sacrifice, she had fallen in love. William, she began, her voice faltering. He turned to her fully, listening, waiting. She took a deep breath. I think I'm falling in love with you. His breath caught. Silence stretched for a beat. Then he cupped her face with both hands, his thumb brushing the curve of her cheek. You have no idea how much I love you, Grace, he whispered. I've loved you from the moment you said yes, not for the child, but for who you are. You gave me something no one else ever has, a chance to matter beyond my name. She leaned into his touch, her heart swelling with emotion. In that moment, nothing else existed, not the sickness, not the fear, just them. Two people who had come together under impossible circumstances and created something real. She wrapped her arms around him and held him close. You're going to make it. I believe that. He closed his eyes, his head resting against her chest. As long as I can keep hearing your voice, I'll keep fighting. The sterile hum of the ultrasound machine filled the hospital room. Grace lay on the examination table, her belly round beneath the thin fabric of her gown. William sat beside her, gripping her hand with quiet intensity. His body was weaker now, slower movements, deeper lines on his face, but his eyes never left. The monitor. He was still here. The 6 months the doctors had predicted had already passed, and he was still breathing, still holding on. Dr. Langford adjusted the probe, eyes scanning the screen. Then he smiled. Well, looks like we have a surprise. Grace frowned. A surprise? The doctor turned the monitor slightly toward them. You're having twins. 2 strong heartbeats. 2 baby boys. Grace's breath hitched. William gasped, his hand flying to his mouth. Twins. The word barely escaped his lips. Dr. Langford nodded. Identical twins. Both healthy. Both strong. Grace turned her head toward William. He looked stunned, his eyes glossy with disbelief. 2 boys, she said softly. We're having 2 boys. William leaned over, resting his forehead against hers, his voice cracking. 2 sons, Grace. I asked for 1 miracle, and now we have 2. She placed her hand over his. It means we're blessed. William sat back in his chair, rubbing a shaky hand down his face, emotion pouring from every line of his expression. I don't deserve this kind of mercy. You do, Grace said gently. You fought harder than anyone else would have. You're still here. Dr. Langford smiled warmly. You have 1 month left, Grace, and I believe William will be here to welcome these boys into the world. William exhaled deeply. I will. I have to. As they left the hospital hand in hand, William glanced at the sky. The sun was beginning to set, casting long rays of light through the clouds. He lifted his eyes and whispered, Thank you. Grace leaned against him, her love for him stronger than it had ever been. Whatever came next, they had already been given a miracle, and she would cherish every single day that remained. The cries of newborns echoed through the hospital room. Grace lay back on the bed, exhausted but glowing with quiet joy. In her arms were 2 perfect, squirming bundles wrapped in soft blue blankets, her sons. Their tiny fists clenched, their eyes shut tight, their cries strong and full of life. William stood beside her, tears in his eyes as he stared at the boys. His hands trembled as he reached forward and gently lifted one into his arms. For a long moment, he said nothing, just stared in awe. Then, his voice cracked as he whispered, "They're so small." Grace adjusted slightly and handed him the second baby. Now, in each arm, he held one of his sons, his legacy, his answered prayer. "They're yours," she said, smiling despite the tears in her eyes. "You made it, William. You're here." A tear rolled down his cheek as he kissed the forehead of one baby, then the other. "I never thought I'd see this day," he whispered. "I never thought I'd hold them. But I did. I made it." He sat down beside her, still holding the boys, unable to look away from their faces. Grace watched him, her heart full. He had lived to see them. He had defied every prediction, every timeline. Love had kept him alive long enough to witness this moment. A week later, the world knew. William spared no expense. The Hale estate was transformed into a palace of light and celebration. Golden drapes flowed from the balconies, chandeliers sparkled in every hall, and every room was filled with fresh flowers. Guests from across the country arrived, business leaders, celebrities, close friends, and family. Everyone had come to meet the heirs of William Hale. Grace stood at the grand staircase in a shimmering gold gown, cradling one of the twins while a nanny held the other. For the first time in her life, she wasn't in the background. She wasn't just a maid. She was the mother of William's children, the woman who had given him his final reason to live. William stepped onto the stage in a sleek black suit, looking stronger than anyone had seen him in months. He took the microphone as the room quieted. His voice rang out clear and steady. "Tonight isn't just a celebration. It's proof that miracles happen. 5 months ago, I was told I wouldn't live to see this day. But here I am, not only alive but standing as the proudest father in the world." The room erupted in applause. He turned toward Grace, his eyes softening. "I present to you my sons, my heirs, Jacob and James Hale." Cheers and champagne toasts filled the mansion. Grace watched William from a few steps away, her heart so full it hurt. He had made it. He had seen them. He had given them his name and his love. And for the first time, she believed love really could defy even death. The morning sun filtered softly through the tall windows of the Hale estate, casting golden light across the living room. William sat in his favorite chair, dressed in a simple sweater and soft slacks, looking more peaceful than he had in weeks. In his arms, his twin sons slept, one nestled against each side of his chest. Their tiny fingers curled gently around the fabric of his shirt. Their breathing matched his, calm, steady, slow. He looked down at them, his heart full, his soul at rest. "My boys," he whispered, barely audible, "you are my greatest gift." In the kitchen, Grace prepared their morning bottles, humming softly to herself. She moved with ease, her steps lighter than they had ever been. Her heart was full. Her world felt whole. William was still here. He had defied the odds. And their family was complete. She poured the warm milk into bottles, turned to carry them into the living room, and then she stopped. Her heart froze. William sat exactly where she had left him, the boys still cradled in his arms. But something was wrong. His head was tilted gently to one side. His arms still held the babies securely, but he wasn't moving. The air shifted. A stillness settled over the room, a silence too deep. She stepped forward slowly. "William?" No response. Her voice cracked. "William, wake up." Still nothing. She rushed to him, placed her hand against his cheek. His skin was cool. Tears filled her eyes before the truth even finished forming. Her knees gave out as she collapsed beside the chair, clutching his arm. "No, no, 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 please don't do this. Please don't leave us." The twins stirred in his arms, tiny whimpers breaking through the silence. Even in death, he had held them close, kept them safe, given them warmth with his last breath. Grace pressed her forehead to his, tears streaming down her face. "You promised. You said you'd fight." But deep in her heart she remembered his words. "I just want to live long enough to hold my child." And he had. He had held them. He had named them. He had loved them with everything he had left. And now his heart, so full of love, had finally let go. She gently took the babies from his arms, holding them tightly, whispering between sobs, "I'll take care of them, William, I promise you." As she looked down at their little faces, she knew he would never truly be gone. He would live in them, in their smiles, in their eyes, in the love he had poured into them from the very beginning. Weeks had passed since William's passing, but his presence lingered in every corner of the Hale estate. The nursery echoed with soft lullabies and the coos of twin boys who bore not only their father's name, but his spirit. Grace moved through each day with quiet strength, caring for the children with unwavering devotion. Her heart ached, but it also overflowed. She had never imagined this life. She had never imagined love could come from such pain. But every time she looked into the faces of Jacob and James, she saw William. In Jacob's curious eyes, in James's stubborn grip, in the way they quieted the moment she held them close, just as their father had once held them for the last time. Grace often found herself sitting in William's favorite chair by the window, the same place where he had taken his last breath. Sometimes she'd speak aloud, just in case he was listening. "They're doing well, William. You'd be proud." She honored every promise he had made. William's legal team had upheld his final wishes without hesitation. The estate was in her name. The twins' futures were secure. But it wasn't the money that mattered. It was the legacy. The legacy of a man who had once ruled over empires, yet found his deepest purpose in the smallest of hands. On the day of the boys' christening, the estate filled again with guests, this time quieter, more reverent. Grace stood at the front of the family chapel, the twins dressed in white, their small fingers clutching the edges of her dress. The priest spoke solemnly about William's life, about the man who had given so much, fought so hard, and defied every prediction to meet his sons. Grace didn't cry, not because she wasn't grieving, but because she was strong now. Strong for them. After the ceremony, she stood alone in the garden, holding the boys in her arms as the sun dipped low behind the trees. "He loved you both more than anything in this world," she whispered. "He gave you everything, even his final breath." She kissed the top of each soft head and closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of the fading sun wash over her. In that moment, there was no pain, only peace. William Hale had died the way he had lived, on his terms, not as a billionaire, not as a tycoon, but as a father, full of love. He had left behind more than wealth. He had left behind 2 sons and a woman who had found her strength through the quiet power of compassion. And though the world would remember him for the empire he built, Grace would remember the man who sat in candlelight, trembling with hope, asking only to be remembered through the eyes of a child.